The sequel to Breath of the Wild is coming at some point. Whether it's this year, next year, I mean, at this point, who really knows? But there is one thing for certain that I need back, and that is traditional Zelda items. What's up, guys? Welcome back, or welcome in for the first time. If you could do me a favor, make sure you guys stick around to the end of this video. We're gonna try a little YouTube experiment, but we will talk about that a little bit later. Let's go ahead and jump right into this. So for the most part, Breath of the Wild was an all-around great game. It took the franchise somewhere it's never been before, and it ended up becoming one of my favorite Zelda games ever. It had its slight downfalls, one of which being the lack of traditional Zelda dungeons, and in my opinion, the other being the lack of traditional Zelda items. And that's what I want to go over today. I want to give you guys my favorite Zelda items that I need back in Breath of the Wild 2. Now, obviously, these are just my favorites. You may have some of your own favorites, and if they're not on this list, go ahead and leave those in the comments below. Okay, so the first one is something not only that I want to see in a Zelda game going forward, but honestly, something that would open up a brand new mechanic that's not in Breath of the Wild currently. The first item is the Silver Scale. So this item is found in one of my favorite Zelda games, Ocarina of Time, and it lets Link dive deeper underwater, which is something you can't do at all in Breath of the Wild now, and I think we desperately need that. I mean, just looking at some of the past Zelda games, you can just imagine what they could do if they would open up that mechanic in Breath of the Wild 2. And the Silver Scale lets you dive, I think it was 6 meters, and then there was another scale you could get after that that let you dive even deeper. So essentially you could go with the same type of progression system as far as how deep you can dive and keep unlocking stuff and opening up new areas as you go through the game. So yeah, we need underwater exploration back in Breath of the Wild 2, and I think the best way to do that is bring back the Silver Scale. Now, I said in my last Zelda video that I would like to see some type of exploration maybe outside of the main land area of Hyrule, maybe to some island. I'd really like to see some type of boat travel or something like that. So I think a really crazy item that they could include in this game would be the Wind Waker. Now hear me out. So the Wind Waker obviously is from the game The Wind Waker, and if you don't know, it's an ancient conductor's baton that controls the power of the wind. It can also change the time of day and is also used to create warp points in Wind Waker as well. Now, I'll be the first to say this is a complete long shot. 99% sure that the Wind Waker will not be in Breath of the Wild 2. But just stick with me here. So if they did actually implement it into the game, I think they would definitely have to take some of its abilities away. I think changing the time of day is fine, and I think that would actually work well in the way that Breath of the Wild is set up now. And obviously controlling the wind is something it needs to do, but I think they could probably implement warp points in a way better way than using the Wind Waker for all those things in a game that's, well, not the Wind Waker. I mean, the main way I would like to see it used is just to help change the direction of the wind so you could go, you know, back and forth to these hypothetical islands that I want to see in the next Breath of the Wild. Now again, this one's not gonna happen, I understand that, but it's really fun to think about, and something like that could really open up a lot of possibilities in the game. I don't know how that would work timeline-wise, but gameplay-wise, I think it would actually be very cool. Okay, so the next item is not even an actual necessary item in the game it's in, but I still think it would be really cool to have this item in the current Hyrule we're exploring, and seemingly the one we'll be exploring in Breath of the Wild 2. So that item is the Magic Cape from Link to the Past. So when Link wears the Magic Cape, essentially he's invisible. Really the only thing that shows up on screen is his shadow, just so you have, you know, an idea of where you're at on the screen. To use the Magic Cape, you actually have to use magic, and it uses a ton of it. So I guess if we're adding this, we're gonna have to go ahead and throw the magic back in too. So when he's wearing the cape, not only is he invisible, but he can also walk over spikes and get hit by enemies and pretty much just take no damage. So the reason this item's actually not necessary is because there's actually a cane in the same game that does essentially the same thing, but it just doesn't turn you invisible. So you can still walk over spikes and, you know, pretty much run into enemies and take no damage. So let's say we saw something like that in Breath of the Wild 2. It would be really nice to use something like that in quick bursts, even if you could only use it for a minute. If you're, you know, insanely outnumbered and you just need to get out of there, you could throw the cape on, you know, you wouldn't have to worry about taking damage, and you could get out of the vicinity at least before your magic runs out, or, you know, whatever they would use to, you know, to limit how much you could actually use something like that. Obviously, you wouldn't want to be able to use it all the time because that would make things way too easy. But I think something like that, just as like a, like, save this for an emergency type of thing. You know what I mean? I think that would be really cool. I think it would be something that would help people out, and at the same time, you could really do a lot of other cool stuff with it. You know, like if you're invisible, I mean, just think about the stuff you could do, especially if it's only for a short time. And I know they've kind of implemented this stuff with the masks and stuff, but eventually when you're walking around with a mask on, whatever enemy you're trying to fool eventually figures it out. I just think this would be a very good addition, and I think it would probably fit well in some puzzle elements in those dungeons we're gonna be getting back in Breath of the Wild too, right? Right. Okay, another magical item from Link to the Past I really wanna see in the sequel to Breath of the Wild is the magic mirror. You know, again, probably not one they're gonna put in the game, and probably one they don't really need in the game, but I really would like to see this one come back. So the way they use this in Link to the Past is you can actually use the magic mirror to transport yourself from the dark world into the light world. And it leaves a portal in the light world so you can get back to the dark world. Now, I don't think they're gonna have two different worlds to travel between in Breath of the Wild 2, but man, if they did, that would be amazing. I don't think they're going to, but that would be amazing. I mean, I guess it could possibly happen, but I don't know, we're getting off track. So I think the coolest way that they could actually implement something like this in Breath of the Wild 2, instead of being able to warp from one world to another, maybe the mirror itself actually builds up power as you go, and you can set your own warp points, kind of like the towers in Breath of the Wild now, but instead of being in, you know, specific locations, maybe in the beginning of the game when you get the mirror, you can set one location. And then by the time, you know, you've done a few things and, you know, powered it up a little bit, you can set 2. And maybe as you go on in the game, you can just keep setting more and more locations, but you actually have the ability to pick where your warp points are on the map instead of them being given to you like they are with the towers. Just an idea, but I think that would be something really, really fun, and it would, again, it would just add a totally new element to the game. Hey, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I got something put on the wall. I'm actually trying to figure out how to get these LED strips behind it so it lights up. Anyway, so the next item I would like to see back in the new Zelda game is the boots. And not like they are in Breath of the Wild now, because as it is right now, the only boots that you can get in the game, and they're not even actually boots, they're like pants and boots, but one lets you walk on sand normally, like, ooh, big whoop. And the other one is pretty much just a set of cold gear just to help you, you know, not freeze. I wanna see the iron boots, which would also help out with underwater exploration, like I said earlier. And just imagine Link flying through Hyrule with the Pegasus boots on, just running as fast as he can. I mean, that would, actually I think that would probably look more funny than anything, but the Pegasus boots, that would be cool too. I mean, imagine Link, dead sprint, sword straight out, just mowing over enemies as he flies by. Oh, I can imagine that right now. It's really funny. Okay, that one might be a little bit too much, but like, what about like the hover boots? And what would be really, really cool is if we got a new pair of boots that did something completely different that we've never seen before. Like steel kicking boots or something like that. That's a terrible idea. But I mean, think about it. The chances are we're not gonna have stasis anymore. So if you had a boot that could let you kick a giant boulder, you know, however far you needed to get it, I mean, whatever, you know? Who knows? I'm not the one who makes these decisions. I'm just, you know, throwing my 2 cents in here. I think it would be very cool to see all the boots back, and like I said, maybe even a new pair. Just a thought. All right, so we're coming kind of close to the end of the list here. I've got a few more, and this one's kind of weird, because it is in Breath of the Wild, but I just feel like they really underused these in Breath of the Wild, and they were pretty much swords. That's pretty much what they were, and I'm talking about boomerangs. We need proper boomerangs, or a proper boomerang, back in the new Breath of the Wild. Now, everybody knows what the boomerang is, so I'm not gonna go over any of that. It's been in every single Zelda game since the beginning, as far as I know, right? Okay, a lot of them, most of them. I'm gonna say it's been in all. Yes, we're going with every single one. Yeah, but what they did with them in Breath of the Wild, in my opinion, is just kind of lame. I mean, the whole idea of it actually being a boomerang in the game is pretty much non-existent. Because yeah, you can throw it, but half the time it doesn't come back to you. I think they're so pointless in Breath of the Wild, and I would like to see a dedicated boomerang come back for Breath of the Wild 2. I think the best boomerang was definitely in Twilight Princess, where you could set the markers and it would go to all those different points. That was useful, and honestly, it was a lot of fun to solve puzzles with that. I think most of the puzzles were just in that first dungeon with that thing, but it was still cool. And you know, there were always little things that popped up around the worlds where you needed to use it. I just think it would be great to get something like that back, a proper boomerang. You know what else might be cool? If we just went straight up back to basics on the boomerang. Like, you know, you get the boomerang, you throw it, it goes this far. You throw it in a fountain, fairy gives it back. Now it goes this far. You know, that would be cool too. Either way, I'm fine with it. I would just like to see the boomerang have some real significance in the next Zelda game. You can keep the slingshot though. We don't want that back. Okay, so the last one on this list is my favorite item in any Zelda game, and I don't care what we call it on this list because no matter what you call it, essentially it's the same tool. But I absolutely need a hook shot in Breath of the Wild 2. You can call it the claw shot, double hook shot, whatever you want to call it. I don't care. I need a hook shot back in Breath of the Wild. It is by far the best item, in my opinion, in any game ever. In my opinion, this item should never be missing from any Zelda game ever. I feel like at this point in time, it's kind of like one of the staple items in the franchise. Now, I know having a hook shot in the game is going to really change up things like the climbing and all that, but I mean, let's be real here, guys. We had all kinds of climbing in the first Breath of the Wild. Do we really need that much climbing in the second one? I mean, yes, obviously I want to be able to climb just as much stuff, but I mean, there's gotta be a better way. We can do this a more efficient way. We've had just the climbing in one game. Like, give us the climbing and a hook shot, just so we can get up these mountains faster or get over to where we need to go faster. And if you don't want to go that way, fine, don't go that way. You could just make the hook shot only be able to grab onto certain areas like it does in almost every other game it's used in. Now, I may be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure I heard somewhere that in the development of the game, they thought about putting a hook shot into Breath of the Wild, but they thought it would take away from the other mechanics. But I gotta say, especially with what I just said about, you know, just limit where it can grab a hold of, like, no way. It should have been in there. It should be in every Zelda game, forever. At the end of the day, I really just hope that they decide to put items like this back in the Zelda game. Breath of the Wild was fine, and I like the way they did things, but you know what? I need a little bit more traditional Zelda back, and those items are one way that I think would be the best way to bring some stuff like that back. But I'm pretty sure as fans of the series, we've all made it pretty clear at this point that, hey, Breath of the Wild was fine, but we need items and we need dungeons. We are going to need those back. All right, guys, that's all I got for this one. Do me one quick favor. You know, if you want to leave a like on this video, go ahead and do that. You want to subscribe? Feel free. More than happy to have you. But what I really want you to do is I want you to pick one of these two videos and watch it all the way through. That would mean a whole lot to me, and it would definitely help me out a ton. So with all that said, guys, thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.